April 12th. The American people learn Franklin Delano Roosevelt, the man they elected 4 times, is dead. Vice President Harry S. Truman, a former judge and senator from Missouri, is sworn in hours later.
Roosevelt had led the country through the Great Depression and through the war. In the 82 days that Truman had been vice president, he met with Roosevelt all of twice. He really knows nothing about what's going on with the war effort.
He didn't think he was up to the job, and there are people who would say he was right.
In July, for the first time, President Truman meets with both British Prime Minister Winston Churchill and Soviet Premier Joseph Stalin at Potsdam, formerly the home of Prussian kings and the German Kaiser.
Europe is devastated. It's a massive disaster zone. The point of the Potsdam Conference is for these 3 governments to come together and figure out how these countries are going to be rebuilt.
But Truman has his eyes on a completely different problem. He huddles with Secretary of War Stimson, and what are they talking about? They're talking about the Pacific.
At the start of the conference, Stimson receives a coded cable from the War Department.
Operated on this morning. Diagnosis not yet complete, but results seem satisfactory. Dr. Groves is pleased. Truman now knew that the atomic bomb had been detonated successfully.
In this moment, we have this amazing window into Truman's thinking because he was keeping a diary. Truman realizes this bomb could be a short circuit to ending the war.
When Truman hears that the atomic bomb actually works, he knows they have to use it. But he wants to give the Japanese one last chance to surrender before he does.
President Truman, along with Churchill and Chiang Kai-shek, the leader of the Republic of China, issue the Potsdam Declaration, a warning to Japan of what awaits if they don't surrender unconditionally.
In this document is wordage that does not mention the atomic bomb, but it does say that if unconditional surrender is not coming, the destruction was going to be historic and massive.
2 days later, Japan's Prime Minister, Kantaro Suzuki, holds a press conference.
When press asks about Potsdam Declaration, Suzuki uses the word mokusatsu. The best translation for that is no comment, or I'm not going to respond to that question. However, the word mokusatsu can also mean we're going to ignore it.
And I think the Japanese media, they're very quick to interpret it in the most hostile and negative way. And then the American media pick it up, and then that becomes the view of the American administration as well, that the Japanese are rejecting the Potsdam Declaration.
And to Truman, the Japanese response is plain and clear. He believes that the Japanese told him to go to hell.
By design, the target of the first atomic bomb is a city relatively unscathed by the war. American military leaders want the Japanese to understand the awful, destructive power of this new weapon.
That morning in Hiroshima is an ordinary morning. People are going about their business. Some people are going into the factories to work. They're still wondering why they've not yet been bombed, and they're expecting it more or less any day. And then people see this light in the sky, the sun shining off a single aircraft.
The first thing is the flashing light as if sun explodes. Then a noise and a shock. The people who were near the epicenter evaporate.
The casualties mount until you get between 90,000 and 160,000 people who've died. The dominant image that survivors give of Hiroshima is of one of the Buddhist hells.
One thing that's really difficult for historians to jive with it is this idea that Truman has chosen military targets. And he writes even in his diary the words, "and not women and children." We'll never really know, did he really feel that this was a military target? Or was he writing that in his diary, understanding that history for generations was going to judge him for this?
B-29s appear over Nagasaki. One carries an atomic bomb.
The U.S. has just one more atom bomb left. But the whole idea is to give Japan the impression that the U.S. has an unlimited stock, and that if Japan won't surrender, the U.S. will continue to unleash atom bombs on Japan.
Between 60 and 70,000 people are killed instantly.
Prime Minister Suzuki convenes the War Council, and the discussion is, are we going to accept the Potsdam Declaration? And the answer from the military is no.
You've had 2 atomic bombs, you've had the Soviet invasion of Manchuria, and yet the Supreme War Council is still split. The war faction, the military, they're absolutely not willing to consider unconditional surrender.
That's when Prime Minister Suzuki makes a very important move, saying that we need to ask the emperor.
This is a standout moment. This is something you would never normally do. There's a sense Hirohito is semi-divine and shouldn't be troubled with the decision-making process. It's a really extraordinary step.
But Hirohito, I think, sees the gravity of the situation. He sees that this is a moment where it's his responsibility to step up as the leader effectively.
And he says, we must bear the unbearable and suffer the insufferable. We will end the war and then move on.
I have received this afternoon a message from the Japanese government. I deem this reply a full acceptance of the Potsdam Declaration, which specifies the unconditional surrender of Japan.
And people go nuts. Tens of thousands of people gather at the gate of the White House.
The world has been holding its breath since the war began. Now it is over. And there is great celebration.
One of the crucial factors in ending this war is that you have Harry Truman, an accidental president who had to be briefed on the wartime situation when he enters the Oval Office. And Hirohito, who has never really made political decisions. They assert themselves and bring the war to an end in August of 1945.
Bataan, Guadalcanal, Iwo Jima, Okinawa. Once obscure points on a map. Now, each place has a new meaning.